You only want to deal with college students, young ones, untrained ones, little ones, weak ones, in uneven situations and settings, is because you're a pusillanimous. I said you're a pusillanimous, timorous, pusillanimous, ultra-crepidarian, dilettante, and you don't want to face someone who can put you in your place. Yes, I challenge you. You pigeon-hearted, pusillanimous weasel. Academic weasel. Fraud. You're a fraud. You're a fraud. But you know what? You're finished. You're finished. You're finished.
Is there anything like that in Christianity? Has the Christian ever said, you want to prove I'm wrong? All you have to do is this. Has he ever done that? The Quran is filled with that kind of thing. Filled with it. Saying, you want to prove this book is wrong? Do this. Prove it. Go ahead. Do it. Filled with that kind of thing.
Call the gospel books Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Well, they call them Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John because we don't know who wrote these books, and there's no point calling them Sam, Fred, Jerry, and Harry. I mean, they're written by people. We don't know who they were written by. They are anonymous. You might not think so because they have the title, The Gospel According to Matthew. Whoever put that title on it was an editor later. The followers of Jesus were Aramaic-speaking peasants from Galilee, lower-class men who were not educated. In fact, Peter and John in Acts chapter 4, verse 13, are literally said to be illiterate. They couldn't read and write. Of course not. They were fishermen. They didn't go to school. The vast majority of people in the ancient world never learned to read, let alone write. And their native language was Aramaic. These books are written in Greek by highly educated, rhetorically trained writers who are skilled in Greek composition.
Now, Paul said he came with a new covenant. Paul said he came with a New Testament. Paul said he came to the Gentiles, and that they no longer had to, those that followed Paul, they no longer had to observe the law of Moses. What was the law of Moses? The 10 Commandments. They no longer had to. They could eat pig's meat. The Jewish people today, following the law of Moses, they can't eat pig's meat. So how could Paul change that law and tell them they could eat pig's meat? Paul said they didn't have to circumcise. All Muslims, all Jews, all of those that follow the prophets are circumcised. How is it that Paul said they don't have to be circumcised? Paul said they didn't have to observe the Sabbath. Now, the Sabbath is one of the commandments, one of the 10 commandments. If you were Christian, you were cool. If you were Christian, you were official. If you were Christian, you could be assimilated. If you were Christian, you were Constantized. If you were acceptable, if you embraced the Pauline doctrine, then you became a Christian. And Christian then became an antithesis of the Nazarenes. It also became an antithesis of the life and the message of the historical Jesus. This new evolution, this new faith system, officially adopted by Constantine, the Roman emperor, the establishment of the Church of Rome, and the subsequent Christology that has developed. I said Christology. Now, what is Christology? Christology is the scientific, systematic dramatization and mythological replacement of the historical Jesus. That's what Christology is. Because if we want to love Christ and follow Christ, we have to follow the real Christ. We have to follow, find, and subscribe to the historical Christ. The issue is, who is willing to follow the historical Christ?
And speaking language like this, God talking, said, behold, I will corrupt your seed. This is the book of Malachi, chapter 2, verse 3. Behold, I will corrupt your seed and spread dung upon your faces. You know what's dung? You know what's dung? Yes, excreta. Yes, God Almighty is going to spread dung on your faces. Even the dung of your solemn feasts, and one shall take you away with it. Malachi 2:3. And thou shalt eat it, telling another prophet of his, another prophet of God, Ezekiel. God tells him, chapter 4, verse 12 of Ezekiel, he says, and thou shalt eat it as barley cakes. What? And thou shalt bake it with dung that cometh out of man in their sight. What you see, fresh dung, fresh excreta with barley cakes, you shall eat it. This is God Almighty telling his prophet to eat barley cakes and fresh dung too, fresh. It must be fresh, not that stale, dried up thing that you can burn like goat. Were there any Muslims existing in the time of Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, in the time of Jesus? Is that the question? Yes. You see, anyone who hearkened to the message of Hazrat Isa alayhi salam was a Muslim. Jesus was a Muslim, and his religion was Islam. There was no such thing as Christianity. The teachings of the church where they say that Jesus is God is not his teaching. He never preached any such thing. He is telling his people that they must be better than the Jew. Unless you are better than the Jew who was just formalistic, he's keeping the letter of the law, forgetting the spirit, he says there is no heaven for you. That's his teaching. He's telling them, come, I will teach you how to pray. Pray like this, and he's teaching them. He said, oh, our Father, which art in heaven, God Almighty, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That is the prayer that he taught. He didn't say the Father of Jesus Christ in heaven, or me, Jesus, who is in heaven. He's talking about the Father in heaven. So in other words, he was preaching nothing but Islam. The churches is quite a different thing altogether. It's not his teaching. They are their own creation. But anyone who followed Musa alayhi salam was a Muslim. Anyone who followed Isa alayhi salam was a Muslim.
The son died when the child was 2 years old. The same day the boy died, there was an eclipse of the sun. The sky went dark. And the Muslims came running to their prophet and said, look, it's a miracle. Your child died and the sky went dark in sadness. It occurred to me, see, if he was a crazy man, he'd probably believe what they said. He'd probably think, yes, it's a miracle. My child died, the sky is dark. Yes, it's a miracle. If he was a crazy man. If he was a liar, he would have taken advantage of it. He would have said, yes, right, my child died, the sky is dark, you tell everyone, it proves I'm a prophet. It's a miracle. But what did he do? He became angry with the Muslims. He told them that was nonsense. He was angry with them. How dare you say that? He said the sun and the moon are signs of God, and they don't worry themselves about the birth of a man or the death of a son of Muhammad. Doesn't look very crazy. Doesn't look much like a liar. Now you have a third alternative, of course, which people tell you all the time. They say, no, he was not a liar. He was not a crazy man. He was deceived by the devil. Deceived by the devil. It's an interesting idea. But whatever you say, you better be ready to back it up. There's a lot of difficulties with that idea. For example, there is a verse in the Quran which tells the reader about a good habit to develop. It tells him, before you read this book, always say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim, which means, I take refuge in God from Satan the rejected. Is this Satan who wrote this? Who said, before you read my book, ask God to save you from me? Is that Satan who wrote that? As Jesus said, if Satan is divided against himself, then his kingdom will fall. He's fighting against his own interests. So let me finish with a story that illustrates a point. As I said, there's many theories and many explanations around.